There's a particular kind of loneliness that settles in when you realize the world has decided who you are before you've had a chance to speak. It's not the loneliness of an empty room or a quiet house. It's the loneliness of standing in a crowded street while people look right through you, as if you're already a ghost. This is a story about a woman who learned that sometimes the hardest journey isn't the miles you travel, but the distance between who others say you are and who you know yourself to be. It's about finding home, not in a place, but in the quiet certainty that you belong to yourself first. The flour sack crumpled in Elena's hands. The fabric rough cotton stamped with Thornton's General Store, established, 1876, twisted between her fingers until her knuckles went white. She stood 3 steps below Mrs. Thornton, who filled the doorway like a wall. "Store policy," the woman's voice carried across the boardwalk, loud enough, clear enough. "No credit for women traveling alone." Elena's mouth opened, closed. The words she'd prepared, "I can pay. Just not today. Just give me until Friday," stopped somewhere in her throat, behind Mrs. Thornton. The dim interior of the store beckoned with smells of coffee beans and lamp oil and the possibility of one more day. Elena could see the flour barrels. Right there. 20 feet away. Mrs. Thornton's hand moved to the doorframe. A final gesture. 7 people stood on the boardwalk. Elena counted them without turning her head. The banker, Mr. Hayes. 2 women in Sunday dresses, though it was Tuesday. A cowhand she didn't recognize. The postal clerk. The blacksmith's wife. A boy of maybe 12, gripping his mother's hand, all of them watching. Elena's fingers opened. The flour sack dropped, landed in the dust at the bottom step with a sound so soft it shouldn't have carried. But in the August heat, in the silence that followed Mrs. Thornton's pronouncement, that whisper of fabric hitting dirt felt loud as a gunshot. She descended the 3 steps, her boots cracked leather. The left heel, worn to nothing, kicked up small clouds with each step. Behind her, the store door closed. The bell above it gave one clear note. Then silence. The boardwalk crowd parted. Not obviously, not dramatically, just a subtle shifting of bodies, creating a corridor of empty space around her as she passed. The blacksmith's wife turned to study the merchandise in the millinery window. The banker discovered something urgent about his pocket watch. The boy stared until his mother pulled him away. Elena walked. Past the land office. Past the barber's pole with its faded paint. Past the livery stable, where horses stamped in shadow, and a gray cat washed its face in a rectangle of afternoon sun. Her hands started shaking somewhere around the barber shop. By the time she reached the horse trough at the far end of the street, the trembling had climbed up her arms to her shoulders. The trough carved from a single cottonwood trunk. The wood gone silver with age, and weather sat in the middle of the dusty intersection where 2 wagon roads met. Elena sat on its edge. The water inside smelled of minerals and warm wood. A horsefly drew circles in the air above the surface. She pulled the small leather pouch from her skirt pocket, opened it, counted the coins onto her palm. 3 pennies, 2 nickels, 2 quarters, 73 cents. She arranged them in a line along the trough's edge, counted again, picked them up one by one, listening to each small clink as metal touched metal. poured them back into the pouch, poured them out again into her waiting palm. Still 73 cents. The afternoon sun pressed down on her shoulders like a hot iron. Her dress faded blue calico, with a careful mend under the left arm that she'd sewn herself last week, stuck to her back, where sweat gathered. She looked at the coins, looked at the town, the bank with its false front, the hotel with its narrow windows, the restaurant with its painted sign, hot meals, 35 cents. 73 cents meant one meal and nothing left. Or 2 nights at the boarding house and no food. Or fabric for a dress she didn't need half as much as she needed breakfast tomorrow. Or it meant nothing at all. Not enough to matter. Not enough to change a single thing. Elena closed her fist around the coins, extended one finger, drew in the dust beside the trough. E-L-E-N-A. Her name appeared in the dirt, uneven letters. The E looked childish, the A tilted wrong. She stared at it, dragged her palm across it, erasing. Drew it again, larger this time. The letters still came out crooked. She erased them again. A shadow fell across her hands. She didn't look up, didn't move. Just watched the shadow stretch across the dust, across where her name had been, obliterating it more completely than her palm had managed. "You need work," the voice came from above and to her left, a man's voice, roughened by something trail dust or whiskey or years of using words only when necessary. Elena looked at the boots first. Brown leather, cracked and mended twice, once across the left toe, where new stitching showed white against darker hide. Once along the right instep. Work boots. Mended by someone who couldn't afford to replace them. Canvas trousers stained with red dust, and something darker near the right knee. A belt with a simple brass buckle that had gone green at the edges. Work-hardened hands hanging loose at his sides, the nails rimmed with dirt. She lifted her eyes to his face. 30, maybe. Could be younger if life had been hard. Could be older if it had been kind. Sun-darkened skin stretched over sharp cheekbones. A scar cut through his left eyebrow. White against the tan. Dark hair that needed cutting weeks ago. And eyes that looked at her without the weight she'd felt from every other person in this town. No pity. No judgment. No decision already made about what she was worth. "I need help." He said it the way a man comments on weather coming. No emotion, just fact. "Got a horse needs leading to my camp. Meal and a place to sleep. Leaving now." No pity in his voice. No curiosity either. Just the flat statement of a transaction labor for food. Elena's throat felt like she'd swallowed dust. She tried to form words. They came out rough. "I don't... fair trade." He turned slightly, gestured toward the livery stable. 2 hours ride, you lead the mare, I pay with supper and a safe place for the night." Safe. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elena looked at her coins, at the town that had just closed its doors to her, at this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere offering exactly what she needed, but strangers always did that. Didn't they? Offered exactly what you needed right up until the moment you discovered what they needed in return. She looked at his hands again. Calloused palms. Dirt worked so deep into the creases it would never wash clean. The right pinky finger bent at an angle that spoke of an old break that had healed wrong. Working hands. Honest hands. Maybe. Or maybe just hands that knew how to work. I'm Caleb Morgan. He said it without extending his hand for shaking, as if he understood she wouldn't take it yet. And I ain't what you're worried I might be. Elena stood. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her. The coins clinked in her closed fist. She looked at the town one more time, at Mrs. Thornton's store with its closed door, at the boarding house where she couldn't afford to stay, at the restaurant where 73 cents bought one meal and no tomorrow. She looked back at Caleb Morgan, at his scarred hands and sun-damaged face and eyes that held steady without looking away. All right? He nodded once, turned, walked toward the livery stable with an even stride that didn't check to see if she followed. After 3 heartbeats, Elena did. Sometimes the hardest step is the first one into the unknown, whether you're reading this in Tennessee or Texas, Montana or Maine. Maybe you know that feeling too. The bay mare moved easy under Elena, too easy. This wasn't a working horse too gentle in the mouth, too willing to follow Caleb's gelding without resistance. He'd given her the better animal. Elena's fingers tightened on the reins. Why would a man give a stranger his personal mount? They rode west. The sun hung 2 hours above the horizon, turning the hills the color of old gold. Sage filled the air with its sharp, clean scent. No trees, just rock and brush and dust that rose in small clouds behind the horse's hooves. Caleb rode ahead. His shoulders moved with his horse's gait, relaxed, like he'd been born in a saddle. Elena watched his hands on the reins, scarred knuckles catching the light, that crooked pinky finger that had healed wrong. The leather moved through his fingers with practiced ease, adjusting without thought. An hour passed. The horses climbed. Their breathing deepened but stayed even. Neither rider spoke. The land rose again. The horses took a long slope at a steady walk, and at the crest, Caleb pulled up, waited for Elena to draw level. Below them, not a ranch. A campsite with ambitions. One building stood complete, a stable, solidly built, fresh lumber still yellow where sun hadn't aged it yet. Beside it, a half-finished cabin. The walls stood straight, but the roof stopped halfway across, leaving the back open to sky. Corral posts rose from the ground in a rough square, but no rails connected them. No garden, no wash line, no curtains in the cabin's single window, a fire ring with old coals, a bedroll under canvas, a Dutch oven sitting beside the dead fire. This was the camp of a man still deciding whether to stay. Caleb dismounted, led his horse toward the stable. Elena followed, her legs stiff from the ride. Inside, the stable smelled of fresh hay and horse and new-cut wood. 4 empty stalls. He led his gelding to the first one, began unsaddling without looking at her. "Bay stays with you tonight." He lifted the saddle off his horse's back, set it carefully on the stall wall. "She's steady. Won't spook easy." Elena watched him work, watched him hang the saddle, fetch water in a wooden bucket, measure grain from a sack. The horses ate. Only then did Caleb walk to the fire ring outside. He built up the fire with practiced movements, set a cast-iron skillet in the coals, cut salt pork from a cloth-wrapped bundle. The meat hit the hot iron with a sizzle that made Elena's stomach clench. He filled a tin pot with water from a barrel, added coffee grounds, set it beside the skillet. The smell of frying meat and boiling coffee filled the air. Elena's mouth watered. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten hot food. Caleb pulled 2 tin plates from a wooden crate, set one down on a flat rock, forked salt pork onto it, poured coffee into a cup, set the cup beside the plate. He looked at Elena, pointed to the plate with his chin. She sat, picked up the cup. The metal burned her palms, but she didn't set it down. Watched Caleb fill his own plate and eat standing, chewing slowly, his eyes on the horses in the stable. He finished, set his plate down, pointed to a lean-to structure tucked behind the stable. "Yours tonight, door latches from inside." Elena's fingers wrapped tighter around the hot cup. Door latches from inside, meaning he couldn't open it from outside, meaning he was telling her she'd be safe, or meaning he was telling her to lock him out. She looked at the lean-to, at Caleb, at the half-finished cabin with no roof. "What do you want from me?" Caleb's eyes met hers, held steady. His face gave nothing away. "Need someone to gentle 6 colts while I finish building. Can't do both." He gestured toward the empty corral posts. "Room, board, 40% when they sell." Elena's heart knocked hard against her ribs. 6 colts. Weeks of work. Maybe months. Why not hire from town? Caleb's jaw shifted. He looked at the ground, at the unfinished cabin, back to her face. "Town men ask questions that ain't their business." He turned, walked to the cabin, picked up a hammer, started driving nails where the roof frame waited, each blow echoing across the empty land. Elena sat with the cooling coffee in her hands, looked at the lean-to, at the unfinished cabin, at the empty corral posts waiting for rails, at Caleb Morgan's back as he hammered in the failing light, and couldn't tell if she'd just been rescued or trapped. The hammer woke her. 3 blows, a pause, 3 more. Elena opened her eyes. Gray light filtered through gaps in the lean-to's plank walls. Dawn, maybe, or close to it. She'd slept in her dress, her boots lined up beside the straw tick mattress where she could reach them fast if needed. The hammer struck again. Steady rhythm. No hesitation between blows. She sat up. Her neck ached where she'd slept wrong. The wool blanket army surplus, faded blue with a corner chewed by moths, fell away from her shoulders. Cold air touched her skin through the calico. Outside, the hammering continued. Elena pulled on her boots, didn't lace them, pushed open the lean-to door. Caleb stood on the cabin's partial roof, framing the section that didn't exist yet. He'd stripped to his undershirt despite the morning cold. Sweat darkened the fabric between his shoulder blades. His hammer rose and fell, driving nails into beam joints with practiced efficiency. He didn't turn around, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge her standing there watching. Elena counted 20 hammer blows before she understood he'd known she was awake, had heard the door open, chose not to look. She walked to the hand pump by the creek. The handle squeaked when she worked it. Cold water splashed into the dust, then began flowing clear. She cupped her palms, drank. The water tasted of minerals and metal. Behind her, the hammering stopped. Elena froze, listened, heard nothing but the creek moving over stones and a meadowlark calling from somewhere in the sage. She turned. Caleb had disappeared inside the stable, feeding the horses, probably. She walked toward the unfinished cabin, her unlaced boots kicking up small dust clouds. Up close, she could see the work. Hand-forged nails expensive, used sparingly at crucial joints. The rest held together with wooden pegs and careful joinery. The walls stood plumb, the window frame sat square. Every cut precise, every angle true. This wasn't the work of a man in a hurry. This was the work of someone building to last. Elena moved past the cabin. The corral posts stood in a rough square, maybe 30 feet on each side. Juniper, locally cut, bark still clinging in strips to the wood. Rawhide lashing wrapped the bases where they'd been sunk into the ground, but no rails connected them yet, just posts standing alone, waiting. She walked to the root cellar. The door, thick planks reinforced with iron straps, sat at an angle in the hillside. She pulled it open. Hinges creaked. Cool air flowed out, carrying the smell of earth and potatoes going soft. Inside, 3 shelves carved into the dirt walls, all empty except the bottom one. A barrel sat there, oak with iron bands. Elena lifted the lid. Potatoes, maybe 20 pounds left, most of them sprouting. White shoots reaching toward light that didn't exist down here. She picked one up, squeezed, still firm enough to eat if you cut away the eyes. 20 pounds of potatoes! That was what Caleb Morgan had for supplies. That, and salt pork, and coffee. This place was hope and poverty standing side by side. Elena replaced the barrel lid, climbed back up into daylight. The sun had cleared the eastern hills now, turning the sage silver green. 6 horses stood in a temporary corral made of rope strung between posts. Young horses, 2 bays, 1 black, 3 chestnuts. All of them skittish, ears swiveling at every sound, unbroken, wild enough that they pressed together at the far side when Elena approached. She stopped 10 feet from the rope, stood still, watched them watching her. The youngest, a bay with 3 white socks, took 1 step forward, stopped, nostrils flaring, testing her scent. Elena didn't move. The sun climbed. Sweat gathered under her arms. A fly landed on her wrist. She let it walk across her skin without brushing it away. The bay colt took another step, then another. Stretched his neck. His nose came within inches of her shoulder. She still didn't move. He touched her dress with his muzzle. Soft pressure. Investigating. His breath warm through the fabric. He likes you. Elena's shoulders jerked. The colt spooked backward, crashing into the others. They scattered to the far corner, snorting. Caleb stood 20 feet away, a tin dipper in his hand. Water dripped from its dented bottom. Didn't mean to startle you. He drank from the dipper. Been watching from the pump. That colt don't approach strangers. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. How long had he been watching Caleb walked closer, stopped at the rope line, studied the horses, then looked at Elena. Need someone to gentle them while I finish the build. He said it like he was continuing a conversation they'd already started. Can't do both. House needs a roof before the rains come. Elena looked at the unfinished cabin, at the 6 young horses, at Caleb's face, which gave away nothing. You're offering me work. Room and board. 40% when they sell. He gestured to the horses. Figure 2 months to break them proper. Maybe 3 for that black one. He's got a hard mouth. 2 months? 3 months? Elena's ribs felt tight around her lungs. That was longer than she'd stayed anywhere since. Why not hire from town? The question came out sharper than she intended. Caleb's jaw shifted. He looked at the horses, at the half-finished cabin, at the ground between his boots. Town men ask what ain't their business. He met her eyes. Town men got opinions about how a thing should be done. Got expectations. He paused. I ain't interested in expectations. Elena studied his face. The scar through his eyebrow, the sun-darkened skin, the way his eyes held steady without looking away. What if I'm trouble? Then you'll leave when trouble comes. He said it simple, a fact, not a threat. Same as anyone else. The bay colt had crept closer again. Not to Caleb. To Elena, standing just inside the rope line, watching her with dark eyes. 2 weeks, Elena said. I'll stay 2 weeks. See how it goes. Caleb nodded once. Fair enough. He turned. Walked 3 steps. Stopped. One more thing. Elena waited. You don't owe me gratitude. You don't owe me explanation about where you come from or why. His shoulders were to her, his voice carrying back over them. You do good work with them horses. We'll both profit. That's the arrangement. He walked to the cabin, picked up his hammer. The blows began again, steady and sure. Elena stood by the rope corral. The bay colt stretched his neck toward her. This time she extended her hand, palm flat, fingers still. He came closer, closer. His nose touched her palm. Warm breath, soft muzzle. Her hand wasn't shaking. When had that happened? She looked at Caleb on the roof, at the unfinished cabin that might become a home, at the 6 horses that might become her livelihood for the next 3 months, at this place where a man had offered her work instead of pity, and realized she'd just agreed to stay somewhere, for weeks, maybe months. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to town for her carpet bag and the next stage out, but her hand rested on the bay colt's nose, and the shaking had stopped. And Caleb Morgan's hammer rang out against the morning air like a promise she almost believed. She pulled her palm away from the colt, looked at her fingers, at the dust and horse smell and the faint dampness where his breath had condensed. 2 weeks, she'd said, but her ribs had loosened. Her lungs pulled in air easier, and somewhere in the center of her chest, a knot she hadn't known was there began to ease. She looked at Caleb, at the way his shoulders moved with each hammer blow, at the careful construction taking shape beneath his hands, and wondered what he was really building here, a house, or something else entirely. The bay colt stood at the rope line, ears forward, watching Elena cross the yard with a bucket of water. 7 days, 7 mornings of this, her walking to the pump, him watching, the distance between them shrinking by inches. Elena set the bucket down inside the corral, stepped back, waited. The colt approached, dipped his nose, drank. His white socks flashed in the morning sun as he shifted weight from hoof to hoof. Tranquilo, Elena said, soft, the Spanish coming without thought. Está bien. The colt's ears swiveled toward her voice. He drank again, lifted his head. Water dripped from his muzzle. Elena extended her fingers, palm flat. He touched it with his nose. She didn't move. His breath warmed her skin. "Buen chico," she whispered. "Muy bueno." From the cabin roof, the hammer stopped. Elena's shoulders tensed. She didn't look up, kept her fingers steady. The Colt nuzzled her palm, looking for grain that wasn't there. The hammer started again. Same rhythm. 3 blows. Pause. 3 more. But awareness prickled across Elena's neck. Caleb had heard her speaking Spanish, heard her voice doing what it had learned to do with frightened animals, softening, soothing, making the world smaller and safer. Elena sang, Quiet, a song her grandmother had taught her, about a dove and a river and waiting for rain. The words felt strange in her mouth after months of silence, but the bay colt's ears stayed forward, listening. She sang through the first verse, then the second. The other horses, still wary, still keeping their distance, stopped moving, stood watching, their heads turned toward her voice. The sun climbed. Elena's shoulders burned from standing still. Sweat gathered under her arms and between her shoulder blades. 10 hours in the corral yesterday had left her muscles tight and aching, but the bay colt hadn't moved away. His head drooped, eyes half closed, content. The hammer blows stopped again. This time, they didn't resume. Elena glanced toward the cabin. Empty roof. Caleb had disappeared. She heard the pump handle squeak, the splash of water, then nothing. She finished the song. Let the silence settle. The bay colt opened his eyes, looked at her, took one step closer, then another. His shoulder touched hers. Elena's breath caught. Her fingers moved without thinking, reached up, touched his neck. He flinched. She froze. His skin twitched under her palm, but he didn't bolt, didn't pull away. She left her grip there. Felt his pulse through the short summer coat. Felt the warmth of him. Ya está, she murmured. Ya está. The sun had passed its high point when she finally stepped away from the colt. Her legs trembled. Her back screamed. But when she walked to the lean-to, the bay colt followed her to the rope line. Stood there, watching her go. Elena pushed open the lean-to door. Stopped. The water trough, inside wooden, cracked along one side, sat full. Fresh water, cold enough that condensation beaded on the outside. She looked toward the cabin, no sign of Caleb, just the empty roof and the stable and the afternoon shadows lengthening across the yard. He'd heard her singing, filled her water. Said nothing. Elena dipped her palms, drank. The water tasted clean and cold, and like something she hadn't earned, but had been given anyway. That evening she found the sourdough starter. She'd gone into the cabin looking for the salt pork Caleb kept wrapped in cheesecloth, found it hanging from a rafter beam. But beside it, on a rough shelf built into the wall, sat a ceramic crock. Wire bail handle, cloth cover tied with string. Elena lifted the cloth. The smell hit her first. Sour, yeasty, alive. She looked inside. The starter clung to the crock's sides, gray and neglected. But when she stirred it with one finger, bubbles rose, not dead, just sleeping. She found flour in a tin on the floor. The lid didn't seal right anymore, warped from heat. She scooped a handful, added water from the barrel outside, mixed it into the starter with a wooden spoon she found in the crate that served as Caleb's kitchen. The starter resisted. Thick, reluctant. She kept mixing, added more water, more flour. Her forearm ached by the time the consistency felt right. She covered the crock, set it in the warmest corner of the cabin, looked at it for a long moment, thinking about the person who'd started this culture, fed it, kept it alive through how many moves and how many years before letting it sleep, thinking about things that survived when you stopped paying attention. 2 days later, the starter had doubled. Elena punched it down, fed it again. The smell filled the cabin sharp, alive, promising. On the 3rd day, she mixed dough. Her palms remembered the rhythm. Knead, fold, turn, knead again. The dough fought her at first, then surrendered, became smooth and elastic under her grip. She shaped a loaf, set it in the Dutch oven, buried the oven in coals from the fire ring. Caleb worked on the roof. His hammer rang out steady. Elena sat on a flat rock near the fire, waited. The smell of baking bread rose from the coals. When she lifted the Dutch oven's lid, the loaf had crowned. Golden. The crust cracked where it had expanded beyond the scoring she'd cut. She tore off a piece. The interior steamed, soft crumb, good rise. She tasted it. Salt and sour and the particular satisfaction of chemistry working the way it should. Caleb appeared from the cabin, stopped, looked at the bread. Elena tore the loaf in half, set one half on his tin plate, said nothing. He sat on the ground, his usual spot near the fire ring, picked up the bread, bit into it, chewed slowly, swallowed, took another bite, then another. He ate 3 pieces, didn't speak. When he finished, he stood, brushed crumbs from his trousers, walked to the cabin. Elena wrapped the remaining bread in a cloth, set it in the wooden crate that held the dishes, started cleaning the Dutch oven. That night, after dark, Caleb emerged from the cabin, walked to where Elena sat on the lean-to's steps, set something down beside her, walked away without a word. A mason jar, honey inside, dark amber, thick. The jar's rim showed scratches, old glass, reused many times. Elena picked it up, held it to the firelight, saw the honey's slow movement when she tilted the jar. Wild honey, from someone who'd found a bee tree and taken the time to harvest it. She looked toward the cabin. Caleb's silhouette moved past the window. The lamp inside guttered and steadied. Elena opened the jar, dipped one finger, tasted. Sweetness exploded across her tongue. Complex. Slightly bitter at the finish. The flavor of desert flowers and sage and something she couldn't name. She closed the jar, set it carefully beside her water bucket. Tomorrow she'd eat bread with honey. Tonight she just sat with the knowledge that Caleb Morgan had received her bread and answered with his own offering. No words, no acknowledgement, just this transaction of sustenance traded for sustenance. On the 9th day, a rider appeared on the eastern ridge. Elena saw him first. She stood in the corral, one palm on the bay colt's shoulder, watching a chestnut mare circle the perimeter. The rider sat his horse on the ridgeline, just sat there, watching. The bay colt tensed under her touch, Elena kept her grip steady. "Tranquilo," she murmured. The rider descended. Took his time. When he entered the yard, Caleb emerged from the cabin, a planer in his hand, shavings clinging to his trousers. The rider was older, 50, maybe. Well-fed. His horse showed good care-groomed coat, sound hooves, tack that had been oiled recently. He wore a vest despite the heat, watch chain visible across his middle. "Saw smoke from your place." "Morgan." The man's voice carried across the yard. "Thought I'd check boundaries. Been meaning to ride over." Caleb set down the planer, walked to meet the rider, stopped 10 feet away, said nothing. The rider's eyes found Elena, stayed there, took in her dress, her hair falling loose from its pins, her palm on the bay colt's shoulder. "Hiring help now?" The question came casual. Too casual. "Business partner." Caleb's voice remained flat. "She's breaking the stock." The rider's eyebrows rose. "Partner?" He said the word like he was tasting something strange. "That's one way to put it. That's the way I'm putting it." Caleb crossed his arms. "Something else you need. Wardle." So this was Henry Wardle, the neighbor from 5 miles south, the one with opinions. Wardell shifted in his saddle. His horse stamped. "Town'll have opinions too. Town can keep 'em." The silence stretched. Wardell looked at Elena again, at the corral, at the half-finished cabin. His mouth tightened into a line. "Your business, I suppose." And he gathered his reins. "Just thought you should know folks are talking. Folks always talk." Caleb's arms stayed crossed. "Hasn't changed my life yet." Wardell turned his horse, rode back the way he'd come. Didn't hurry. Didn't look back. Just disappeared over the eastern ridge at an easy walk. Caleb stood watching until the rider vanished. Then he picked up his planer, returned to the cabin. The rasp of wood on metal resumed. Elena stayed in the corral, her palm on the bay colt's shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the 4 words Caleb had spoken. She's breaking the stock. Not hired help. Partner. He'd claimed her work in front of a man who would carry that statement back to town. Who would tell others. Who would spread the story that Caleb Morgan had a woman at his place and called her his business partner. The sun dropped toward the western hills. Long shadows stretched across the yard. The horses settled. The bay colt's head drooped beside Elena's shoulder. His breathing slowed. Content. Elena looked at her fingers where they rested on the colt's neck. Calloused now. The nails rimmed with dirt, a blister healing on her right thumb. Working hands. She spread her fingers, watched them in the golden light, turned them palm up, palm down. They weren't shaking. When had they stopped? This morning, yesterday, 3 days ago, she couldn't remember the last time they'd trembled. The bay colt shifted. His head came to rest on her shoulder, heavy, trusting, his breath warm against her neck. Elena stood perfectly still, let his weight settle, felt the solid reality of him pressed against her, and realized with a start that she hadn't thought about Robert, about the man who'd left her at that train depot for 3 whole days. The lean-to needed cleaning. 3 weeks of dust and hay chaff had accumulated in the corners. Elena pulled the straw tick mattress off its frame, shook it outside. Dust billowed in the afternoon light. She swept the plank floor. The broom willow twigs bound with wire scraped against the wood grain. Under where the mattress had been, the boards showed darker, protected from sun and foot traffic. And something else. A corner of brown paper visible between two planks. Elena set down the broom, knelt, worked her fingers into the gap. The paper resisted, then slid free. Not one sheet, 4 folded together. She unfolded them carefully. Architectural drawings, pencil on brown paper, precise lines, measurements written in a careful hand along the margins. A house, not the cabin that stood half-finished in the yard. A real house, 2 stories, kitchen with a window facing east marked "Morning Light" in small letters. Parlor, 2 bedrooms upstairs, and on the front a porch, wide, deep. Facing west, the notation read, "Evening View." Elena ran one finger along the lines. Someone had spent hours on these drawings, had measured twice, had planned for windows that would catch specific light at specific times of day, had imagined sitting on that west-facing porch, watching the sun go down, had imagined a life here that looked nothing like the campsite currently occupying this land. She studied the kitchen detail. A real stove, shelving, a pantry, windows on 2 walls for cross breeze. Whoever had drawn this understood how a woman would work in that space, understood the path her feet would take from stove to table to sink. Elena refolded the papers, exactly as they'd been, slid them back between the planks, positioned the mattress over the spot, picked up her broom, continued sweeping. But her grip moved slower now. Her mind stayed on those drawings, on the notation, "Evening View," written beside the west-facing porch, on the careful attention to morning light in the kitchen, on the fact that Caleb Morgan had hidden these plans under a mattress in a lean-to, where he thought no one would find them. The sky had been building all afternoon, clouds massing over the western hills, the air thick and still. Elena's dress stuck to her back as she worked with the horses. The bay colt followed her around the corral. The chestnut mare had started taking grain from her palm. Small progress, daily increments of trust. The first thunder came at dusk, low, rolling across the hills like a boulder gaining speed. The horses' heads shot up, ears pricked. The bay colt wheeled, crashed into the rope line. It held. He spun. The other horses scattered to the corners. Elena moved toward them, palms out. "Tranquilo," she called, but her voice disappeared in the second thunder crack. Louder, closer. The sky opened. Rain hit like fists. Cold, hard. Elena's hair flattened against her skull in seconds. Her dress soaked through. The horses panicked. The black gelding reared, came down on the rope line. It snapped. 6 horses loose in the yard. Caleb appeared from the cabin. No hat, no coat, just him running through the rain toward the chaos. He caught the black gelding's mane, hauled himself up. No saddle, no bridle, just his grip, twisted in wet horsehair, and his legs clamped around the animal's barrel. The gelding bolted toward the open range. Caleb's voice cut through the rain, sharp, commanding. The horse wheeled, headed back toward the stable. Elena grabbed for the bay colt. Missed. He bolted past her. She ran after him. Her boots slipped in the mud. She went down, palms and knees in the wet dirt. Pushed up. Kept running. The colt stopped at the stable door. Confused. Frightened. Elena approached slowly. Rain poured down her face. Blurred her vision. "Ya está," she called. "Ven aquí." The colt's ears swiveled. Found her voice. He turned. Walked to her. Let her fingers close on his mane. She led him into the stable. Found a stall. Pushed him inside. Latched the door. Turned. Ran back out. Caleb had the black gelding in a stall. Was already moving toward one of the chestnuts. Elena caught the other chestnut. Then the mare. Then the remaining bay. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. 10 hours of work before the storm had left her shoulders screaming. But one by one. The horses came in from the rain, the last one secured. Elena leaned against a stall door. Water dripped from her nose, her chin, the hem of her dress. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been this wet. Caleb stood at the stable's entrance, watching the rain, his shirt plastered to his back, his hair dripping. He didn't move. Just stood there, breathing hard. Elena walked to where he stood. Stopped beside him. Together they watched the storm. Lightning split the western sky. Thunder followed. The rain turned horizontal, driven by wind that bent the sage flat. That was... Elena started. Close. Caleb finished. Neither of them moved. The rain continued. 10 minutes, 20. The storm's center passed. The rain gentled. Became steady instead of violent. The horses settled. Their breathing slowed. The stable filled with the smell of wet horse and wet hay and wet humans. Caleb turned, walked to the far corner, sat on the floor with his back against a support beam. Elena followed. Sat beside him. Not close, but not distant either, maybe 3 feet between them. The smell intensified as their body heat began drying their clothes. Elena's dress stuck to her legs, her arms. She pulled at the fabric. It clung stubbornly. Caleb reached into his coat, pulled out a tin flask, dented, tarnished. He held it up to what little light came through the stable door. For bad nights. He unscrewed the cap, drank, offered it to Elena. She took it, the metal cold against her palm. She drank. Whiskey burned down her throat, hit her stomach like fire. She coughed. Handed the flask back. Caleb's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. The expression crossed his face so fast Elena couldn't be sure she'd seen it. He drank again, capped the flask, set it on the floor between them. The rain drummed on the roof, steady, relentless. Elena's teeth wanted to chatter, but she clenched her jaw, wouldn't give in to the cold. Why alone out here? The question left her mouth before she could stop it. Caleb picked up the flask, turned it in his grip. The initials J.M. showed faintly on the side. He traced them with his thumb. Too many eyes in town. He said it quiet. Not to her, to the flask. People watching, judging, deciding what you are before you open your mouth. Elena pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. Me too. Caleb looked at her then, really looked. His eyes held hers in the dim light. The man who left you. He paused. His loss. Not a question, not comfort, just a statement of fact. Delivered in the same tone he'd used to comment on the weather or the price of grain. The laugh surprised Elena, burst out of her ribs before she could control it. A short bark of sound, genuine, startling. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Weeks, months. The sound felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else, but it had come from her. Caleb's expression didn't change, but warmth shifted in his eyes. "Wasn't funny," Elena said, still smiling despite herself. "Wasn't meant to be." Caleb uncapped the flask. Drank, offered it again. Elena took it. Drank. Didn't cough this time. The whiskey spread warmth through her ribs, chased away some of the cold. She handed the flask back. Their fingers brushed. Both of them ignored it. The silence settled. Comfortable now? The rain continued, but softer. The horse's breathing mixed with the sound of water on the roof and dripping from the eaves. Elena shifted. Her shoulder touched Caleb's. She froze, started to pull away. He didn't move. She stayed where she was. Their shoulders pressed together, wet fabric on wet fabric. Shared warmth beginning to build between them. Water dripped from Elena's hair. One drop, two, landed on Caleb's shirt, left dark circles on the already soaked fabric. He didn't pull away, didn't acknowledge it, just sat there, his shoulder against hers. Solid. Present. Elena's breathing slowed, matched his rhythm. In, out. The whiskey warming her from inside, his presence warming her from outside. The storm fading to background noise. She closed her eyes, let her head rest against the support beam, felt the weight of 3 weeks of work settling into her bones, the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from using your body the way it was meant to be used. Elena. She opened her eyes. Caleb was looking at her, his face closer than she'd realized. 6 inches away, maybe less. "What you did out there?" He gestured toward the yard, toward where the horses had scattered. "That was good work." Elena's throat tightened. She nodded. Couldn't trust her voice yet. "We work well together." He said it simple. Observation. No weight behind it. "Good to know. We, together." The words hung in the space between them. Elena looked at their shoulders still touching, at the flask sitting on the floor, at Caleb's profile in the fading light, the scar through his eyebrow, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly when wet. She looked away, focused on the horses, on the rain, on anything except the sudden awareness that she'd stopped thinking of this place as Caleb's ranch, started thinking of it as theirs. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to the lean-to to pack her carpet bag, should have reminded her that staying in one place, trusting one person, believing in one future had destroyed her before. But her shoulder pressed against Caleb's, and the warmth building between them felt like the opposite of destruction. It felt like building something instead. The rain stopped. Just stopped. One moment drumming on the roof, the next moment silent. The sudden absence of sound felt louder than the storm had been. Caleb stood, offered his hand to help Elena up. She looked at it. Calloused palm, scarred knuckles, that crooked pinky finger. She took it, his grip firm. He pulled her to her feet, held on a moment longer than necessary, then let go. "Should check the roof," he said. "Make sure nothing leaked." Elena nodded, followed him out of the stable. The yard had transformed into a maze of puddles reflecting the emerging stars. The air smelled clean, washed, new. They walked to the cabin. Caleb pushed open the door. Elena followed him inside. The interior remained dry. No leaks. But the kerosene lamp had blown out. Darkness filled the space. Caleb found matches, struck one. The flame flared. He lit the lamp, adjusted the wick. Golden light spread across the walls, across the half-finished roof beams, across the table and the shelf with the sourdough crock and the spot where architectural drawings lay hidden under a mattress in a lean-to. Elena turned to leave, go back to her space, her lean-to, her separate existence. Caleb's voice stopped her. Elena. She turned back. He stood in the lamplight, water still dripping from his hair, his shirt molding to his shoulders, the flask visible in his coat pocket, his eyes holding hers with an intensity she hadn't seen before. What? She asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to be deciding something, wrestling with words. Then he said, nothing, just... He paused. Good night? Elena studied his face. Whatever he'd been about to say remained locked behind his teeth, but his eyes told a different story, one she wasn't sure she knew how to read yet. Good night, she replied. She walked to the lean-to, changed into dry clothes, hung her wet dress on a peg, lay down on the straw tick mattress, felt the papers hidden beneath it, the careful drawings of a house that didn't exist yet, the west-facing porch, the notation about evening views, and wondered what Caleb Morgan had been about to say before he'd swallowed the words back down. Wondered if it had anything to do with the way his grip had held hers a moment too long after helping her up. Wondered if his shoulder still felt warm where hers had pressed against it. Wondered when she'd started wondering about these things at all. Day 22. Elena stood in the lean-to. Her dress, the blue calico, hung on its peg. She'd mended it last week. The tear under the left arm now showed careful stitching. Small, even stitches. The kind her mother had taught her. She pulled the dress over her head, smoothed the fabric. It smelled of soap and sun and the lavender that grew wild near the creek. She'd washed it yesterday, dried it on the corral fence while working with the horses. Her hair came next. She unbraided it, worked her fingers through the tangles, rebraided it, pinned it at the nape of her neck. The bone hairpins her mother's slid into place. Clean, presentable, ready. For what? She wasn't certain, but Caleb had said they needed supplies. Had asked if she wanted to come to town. And her chest had answered yes before her mind could argue. Caleb waited by the wagon, not the one he'd used to haul lumber. A smaller one. 2-seater. Spring cushion on the bench. He'd hitched the bay mare and the chestnut gelding, the gentlest of the horses they'd been working. Elena climbed up, settled on the bench. Caleb didn't offer his hand. Didn't need to. She could manage. He climbed up beside her, released the brake, clicked to the horses. They moved forward. The wagon creaked. The wheels found the ruts in the road and settled into rhythm. They rode in silence. The morning sun climbed. The land rolled past. Gold hills, sage, a hawk circling overhead. Elena watched it all, tried not to think about the last time she'd been in town. The flour sack falling in the dust, Mrs. Thornton's voice carrying across the boardwalk. 7 people watching her humiliation. Caleb's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to come inside." Elena looked at him. His eyes stayed on the road, his grip loose on the reins. "Can wait with the wagon," he continued. "Nobody'll bother you." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm coming inside." Caleb nodded once, said nothing more. The town appeared over a rise. Same buildings, same dusty street, same horse trough where Elena had sat counting inadequate coins. The wagon rolled down the main street. People turned to look. Elena kept her eyes forward, spine straight, palms folded in her lap. Caleb pulled up in front of Thornton's general store, set the brake, climbed down. This time he offered his hand. Elena took it, his palm rough and warm. She stepped down, released his grip. Together they walked to the store entrance. Mrs. Thornton stood behind the counter. Her eyes went wide when Elena walked through the door. Her mouth opened, closed. No words emerged. Caleb moved to the counter, pulled a list from his pocket. "Need these supplies." He set the paper down. His voice carried, louder than necessary. "Put it on the Morgan Ranch account." Morgan Ranch. The name hung in the air. Mrs. Thornton picked up the list. Her eyes flicked from the paper to Elena to Caleb and back to the paper. "The Morgan Ranch account," she repeated, her voice uncertain. "That's what I said." Caleb's tone remained flat, matter of fact. Mrs. Thornton's face reddened. She gathered items from the shelves. Flour, coffee, sugar, salt, dried beans. Set them on the counter one by one. Her movements stiff, mechanical. Elena wandered the store, ran her fingers along a bolt of fabric. Dark blue. Sturdy weave. Good for work dresses. She looked at the price, looked at her palms, thought about the 40% Caleb had promised when the horses sold, thought about having money, her own money, earned through her own labor. She moved to the window, looked out at the street, saw the banker, Mr. Hayes, staring at the wagon, at the Morgan Ranch name visible on the account book through the store window. His eyebrows rose. He turned, walked into the land office. Within seconds, 2 faces appeared in the land office window, watching. Elena turned back to the counter. Caleb and Mrs. Thornton conducted business in tense silence. Money changed hands. Caleb loaded supplies into a wooden crate. Mrs. Thornton watched Elena like she might steal something. Elena met her eyes, held them. Neither woman spoke, but awareness passed between them. Some acknowledgement, some shift in the balance. Elena turned, walked out of the store, climbed onto the wagon without waiting for Caleb. He emerged moments later, loaded the crate into the wagon bed, climbed up beside her, released the brake. The horses moved forward. They left town at the same pace they'd entered. No hurry, no shame. Just 2 people on a wagon heading home. Home. The word settled into Elena's mind without permission. When had she started thinking of it that way? They'd traveled maybe 3 miles when the rider appeared, coming from the south. Fast. Too fast for the heat. Caleb's grip tightened on the reins, almost imperceptibly, but Elena saw it, felt his body tense beside her. The rider pulled up, blocked. From the look of its poor hooves and ill-fitting saddle tossed its head. Foam showed at its mouth. Ridden hard. Ridden wrong. Elena knew the rider before he spoke. Would have known him in full dark. His shape, his posture. The way he sat a horse like he'd rather be anywhere else. Robert. Her palms went cold, then hot, then numb. She gripped the wagon seat, felt splinters dig into her skin. Robert dismounted, walked toward the wagon, stopped 10 feet away. His clothes showed travel dust. His face showed stubble. 3 days' growth at least. But his hands remained clean, manicured. The nails trimmed and filed. Elena, his voice cracked on her name. Wait, please. Elena's throat closed. No words would come. She looked at Caleb. His jaw clenched. But he said nothing. Just sat there, leaving this to her. Robert took another step. I need to talk to you. Caleb's voice came quiet, meant only for Elena. Your choice. Elena nodded. Climbed down from the wagon. Her legs shook. She walked forward. Stopped 5 feet from Robert. Close enough to hear him. Far enough to run. Caleb clicked to the horses, moved the wagon forward. 50 yards up the road. Stopped. Waited. Within sight, but out of earshot. Robert's fingers twisted together. I'm sorry. The words rushed out. I was a coward. My family, they didn't approve. I let them convince me, let them make me believe. He stopped. Started again. I made a terrible mistake. Elena watched his mouth move. Heard the words. They felt like they were happening to someone else. Some other woman standing in the dust listening to apologies from a man who'd left her at a train depot with 73 cents and a carpet bag. I've come to make it right. Robert reached for her hand. She pulled back. He froze. Elena, please. Come back with me. To St. Louis. I'll marry you. We'll do it proper. My family will accept it. They'll have to. Elena looked at his hand. Extended toward her. Clean nails. Smooth palms. No calluses. No scars. Hands that had never worked. Never built anything. Never gentled a frightened horse, or split firewood, or driven nails into beam joints. She looked at her own palms. Dirt permanent in the creases. Calluses on her skin. A healing blister on her right thumb. Nails broken short. Flesh darkened by sun and weather. Working hands. Honest hands. Hands that had earned their roughness. No, Elena said. Robert blinked. What? No. The word came easier the second time. Clearer. Elena, you don't understand. I'm offering you, I understand. Elena's voice steadied. You're offering me what you think I need, what you think I should want. St. Louis. Respectability. A real life. Robert's voice rose. Desperate now. You can't stay here. This isn't a life, living in the middle of nowhere with someone who sees what I can do instead of what I can't. Elena cut him off. With someone who offered me work instead of pity. Robert's face reddened. He's using you. Can't you see that taking advantage? I'm his business partner. Elena said it clear, firm. The horses are mine to break. The profit is mine to share. That's the arrangement. That's what he told you. Robert's tone turned bitter. Men like that. They say whatever. Men like what? Elena's palms curled into fists. Men who keep their word, men who pay fair wages, men who don't run when things get difficult. The words hit like stones. Robert stepped back. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I made a mistake, he said, quieter now. But I'm here. I came back. That should count for something. Elena looked at him. Really looked. Saw the boy she'd agreed to marry 3 months ago. Saw the promise he'd made. The future he'd painted. The life he'd sworn they'd build together. Saw all of it for what it was. Paper. Thin. Ready to tear at the first strong wind. It doesn't, she said. Not anymore. She turned. Walked back to the wagon. Caleb's hand appeared. This time she took it. Let him pull her up onto the seat. Settled beside him. Robert called after her. You're being foolish. This won't last. You'll regret this. Elena didn't turn around. Caleb released the brake, clicked to the horses. The wagon rolled forward. They passed Robert standing in the road. His horse grazing. His clean hands hanging useless at his sides. Elena looked straight ahead. Watched the road. Counted breaths. Her heart hammered. Her palms shook. But not from fear. From anger and relief mixed together. Like a door slamming shut and another one opening. Caleb said nothing. Just drove, the silence between them different now, heavier, weighted with awareness unspoken. A mile passed, then 2. The tension in Elena's shoulders slowly released. Her breathing steadied. Caleb's voice came quiet. Could have gone. He's offering more than this. Elena's head snapped toward him. What? A real house? City life? Respectability? Caleb's eyes stayed on the road. That's worth something. You think I stayed out of duty? Elena's voice sharpened. You think I'm here because I had nowhere else to go? Didn't say that. Didn't have to. Elena's jaw clenched. I stayed because I chose to stay. Because the work matters. Because... She stopped. The words tangled in her throat. Because what? Because of the horses. Because of the bread she'd learned to bake. Because of shoulders touching in the dark of a stable during a storm. Caleb pulled the wagon off the road. Set the brake. Turned to face her. Because what? He asked. Elena looked at his face. At the scar through his eyebrow. At his eyes holding hers. Demanding truth. Because this is mine, she said finally. The work, the horses, the bread. She gestured at the wagon, the road, the land around them. All of it. Mine. I earned it. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody can take it away. Caleb's expression didn't change, but warmth shifted in his eyes. Ours, he said. Elena's breath caught. What? The work, the horses, the land. Caleb's voice stayed steady, matter of fact. It's ours. Partnership. Remember? The word hung between them. Partnership. But the way he said it, the weight behind it, meant more than business arrangements and profit shares. Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. Caleb released the brake. The horses moved forward. The wagon rolled toward home. But Elena's mind stayed on the moment Robert's hand had reached for hers, and she'd pulled away. On the contrast between his soft palms and her calloused ones, on the choice she'd made standing in the dust, and realized she'd chosen work over comfort, struggle over security, an uncertain future over a promised one. and the choice hadn't felt difficult at all. She looked at her palms, at the dirt and calluses and broken nails, at the proof of 3 weeks' labor written into her flesh, looked at Caleb's grip on the reins, scarred, worn, honest, and wondered when she'd stopped comparing them to Robert's clean hands and started seeing them as the standard instead. The wagon wheels ground against the ruts, mile after mile. The silence between them felt like a physical weight pressing on Elena's ribs. She stared at her palms in her lap, at the calluses, at the dirt she couldn't wash out no matter how hard she scrubbed. Caleb's knuckles showed white where he gripped the reins. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to spit out. The ranch appeared over the rise. The cabin, the stable, the corral with its rope lines. Everything she'd spent 3 weeks building toward, everything that belonged to someone else. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop, set the brake, climbed down without offering his hand, started unloading supplies without looking at her, his shoulders rigid, his movements sharp and controlled. Elena climbed down, her legs unsteady. 10 hours in the corral yesterday had left her thighs burning. She reached for a bag of flour. Caleb's hand shot out, grabbed it first. "I got it!" His voice flat, cold. Elena stepped back, watched him carry supplies to the cabin. 1 trip, 2, 3, each time he passed her without meeting her eyes. On the 4th trip, she tried again, reached for the coffee tin, said, "I got it. I can help. Don't need your help." Caleb's eyes met hers finally. Hard. "Don't need you feeling obligated." The word hit like a fist to her stomach. Obligated. Like everything she'd done here, the horses, the bread, the work had been payment for charity received. Like she owed him beyond the arrangement they'd made. "I never said I felt obligated. Didn't have to." Caleb grabbed the last bag. "Should have gone with him. Man was offering you a real life. Security, respectability. What have I got? Half a cabin and 6 half-broke horses. You think that's what I want?" Elena's voice rose. "Respectability. Most women do. I'm not most women. No?" Caleb turned, faced her full on. "You're a woman who runs, who doesn't stay anywhere long enough to put down roots, who'll pack up and leave the minute things get hard." Elena's breath stopped. The words sliced clean through, found the soft places she'd tried to protect, the truth she'd been running from. "That's not," she started. "You've been here 3 weeks, already had 1 foot out the door since day 1, looking for the exit, waiting for the excuse." Caleb's fingers curled into fists, released. "Today you got your excuse. Man came back, offered you everything, and you said no to prove some point to yourself, to prove you're strong enough to choose the hard path." His voice dropped, went quiet, more dangerous than shouting. "But choosing to stay ain't the same as wanting to stay." Elena's throat closed. Her ribs felt crushed. Every word he'd said was true. She'd been waiting, testing, keeping her carpet bag within reach, never unpacking all the way, never committing, never trusting that this could last. "I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought we were partners," Caleb finished. "In business, that's what we are. That's all we are. Don't confuse it for something else." He walked to the cabin, disappeared inside. The door didn't slam, didn't need to. The quiet closing felt worse. Elena stood in the yard. The afternoon sun pressed down. Sweat gathered under her arms, between her breasts, at the small of her back. Her shoulders screamed from yesterday's work. Her hands cramped from gripping reins. She looked at the lean-to, at the corral, at the horses watching her with dark eyes, at the place she'd been stupid enough to think might become home. Her feet moved, carried her to the lean-to. She pushed open the door. The dim interior smelled of straw and her own sweat and 3 weeks of living. She pulled the carpet bag from under the bed, set it on the straw tick mattress. The leather cracked and worn, the brass clasps tarnished. She opened it. Her other dress lay folded inside. The gray one, less faded than the blue, saved for occasions that never came. She pulled it out, shook it. Dust rose in the dim light. She folded the blue calico, the one she'd mended, the one that smelled of lavender and sun, placed it in the bag, smoothed it flat. Her mother's shawl came next, Mexican embroidery, red and gold thread on black wool, the only thing of value she owned. She folded it, her fingers shook, placed it on top of the dress, the bone hairpins, her mother's. She wrapped them in a handkerchief, set them in the bag's corner, a spare pair of stockings, darned at the heel, a cotton chemise, a bar of soap she'd made from lye and tallow, the small leather pouch that held her coins, heavier now than 3 weeks ago. Caleb had paid her for work done, $10. More money than she'd held in months. Obligated. The word echoed. He thought she stayed from obligation, from some twisted sense of duty, like she was paying a debt. Maybe she was. Maybe that's all this had been. A transaction. Room and board in exchange for labor. Nothing more. Her hands moved mechanically, gathering her few possessions. Her entire life fit in a carpet bag. Always had. Probably always would. She'd done this before. In St. Louis. In Kansas City. In Omaha. In every place that had promised something better and delivered something worse. She knew how to pack. Knew how to leave before the leaving became impossible. Knew how to protect herself by refusing to belong anywhere. The bag filled. She looked around the lean-to. At the water trough, Caleb had filled every morning without being asked. At the wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed. At the window that faced east, so she could wake with the sun. At the place someone had prepared for her before she'd even agreed to stay. Her ribs ached, a physical pain, sharp, relentless. She pressed her palm against her chest, tried to breathe through it. Foolish. She'd been foolish, letting herself think this could be different, that Caleb was different, that she was different, but she wasn't. She was still the woman who'd been left at a train depot, still the woman no one wanted enough to fight for, still the woman who didn't deserve permanence. The carpet bag sat on the bed, full, ready. She picked it up, the weight familiar in her grip. She'd carried it through 3 states, through 6 towns, through countless disappointments. What was one more? She lay down on the straw tick, still dressed, still wearing her boots. The carpet bag beside her. Ready for morning, ready to walk to town, ready to catch the next stage heading anywhere else. Sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling, at the rough planks, at a spider web in the corner, watched moonlight move across the wall as the hours passed. Caleb's words repeated. Choosing to stay ain't the same as wanting to stay. He was right. She'd been choosing, every day, making the deliberate decision to remain, but wanting. That implied more than choice, deeper than reason. Something that terrified her. The rooster crowed. Dawn coming. Elena sat up, her neck stiff, her back aching from 12-hour days in the corral. She hadn't slept, not really, just drifted through half-conscious thoughts that all led to the same conclusion: leaving was easier than staying. Always had been. She picked up the carpet bag, stood, walked to the door, pushed it open. The pre-dawn light turned everything gray, colorless. The yard, the cabin, the corral. All of it looked temporary, impermanent, like it might dissolve if she looked away. She walked toward the corral, her boots heavy, each step requiring effort. Her thighs burned, her shoulders screamed, yesterday's work still living in her muscles. The bay colt stood at the rope line, waiting. He nickered when he saw her, walked to meet her. Elena stopped, set the carpet bag down in the dust, extended her empty hand. The colt pushed his nose into her palm. Warm breath, soft muzzle. Trust. He didn't know she'd been abandoned, didn't know she was damaged. Didn't know she was the kind of person who ran when things got difficult. He only knew her hands were gentle. Her voice was soft. She'd never hurt him. That was enough for him. Why wasn't it enough for her? The colt's head came to rest on her shoulder, heavy, trusting, his breathing slow and even. Content. Elena's palm moved to his neck, scratched behind his ear. He leaned into the touch, pressed harder against her. 3 weeks ago, this horse had been wild, skittish, afraid of human contact. She'd done that, changed him, gentled him, made him trust, not through force, through patience, through showing up every day, through proving with her hands and her voice that she wouldn't hurt him, through staying. Elena's throat tightened, her eyes burned. She pressed her face against the colt's neck, felt his pulse through his skin, felt the solid reality of him. "I don't want to go," she whispered into his coat. The words surprised her, the truth of them, the weight. She didn't want to go, didn't want to walk to town and catch a stage and start over somewhere else. Didn't want to pack and unpack in another lean-to in another town with another person who'd eventually decide she wasn't worth keeping. She wanted to stay here. With these horses, with this work, with the bread she'd learned to bake, and the water that tasted like minerals, and the sound of Caleb's hammer in the morning. She wanted to stay. The awareness settled into her bones, heavy, undeniable. She looked at the carpet bag, at her entire life sitting in the dust beside her boots, at the proof of her cowardice made manifest. She'd been about to run, again, because Caleb's words had cut too close, had exposed the truth she didn't trust this, didn't trust him. Didn't trust herself. But the bay colt trusted her, despite everything, despite his own fear, despite 3 weeks being nowhere near long enough to erase the wildness. He trusted her anyway. Elena pulled away from the colt, picked up the carpet bag, walked back to the lean-to, set the bag on the bed, opened it, one by one. She unpacked the gray dress, the blue calico, her mother's shawl, the hairpins, the stockings, the chemise, the soap, the coins. She hung the dresses on their pegs, folded the shawl, placed it at the foot of the bed, put the hairpins in the small wooden box, arranged them carefully. She pushed the empty carpet bag under the bed, all the way to the wall, out of reach, out of sight. Then she walked to the cabin. Caleb sat on the porch, not the finished part, the part still waiting for rails. His straight razor lay on the boards beside him, unused. His face showed stubble. His eyes showed worse. Sleeplessness. Regret. He looked up when her shadow fell across him, his expression guarded. "I'm staying," Elena said. Caleb's jaw worked. He looked away, looked back. "Don't stay because I'm staying because I want to." Elena's voice steadied. "Not because I'm obligated, not because I have nowhere else to go, because I want to be here, working these horses, baking bread, living in that lean-to until you build me something better." Caleb stood, slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Elena, you were right," she cut him off. "I've had one foot out the door since I got here. I've been waiting for you to give me a reason to leave, but you never did. So I almost created one. Almost ran because that's what I do. That's what I've always done." She took a breath. "I'm done running." The words hung between them, true, final, terrifying. Caleb's hand reached out, stopped halfway, uncertain. Elena closed the distance, took his grip, his palm rough and warm and steady against hers. "Good," Caleb said, his voice rough, raw, "because I don't want you to go." Elena's ribs loosened. The ache that had lived there since yesterday began to ease. Not gone, but manageable. She squeezed his hand, let go, turned toward the corral where the bay colt still waited, turned toward work, toward staying, toward whatever came next. 6 weeks. The cabin stood complete. Elena leaned against the doorframe, her palms white with lime dust. The whitewash bucket sat at her feet, half empty. The interior walls gleamed wet and bright in the afternoon sun, fresh, clean, new. Caleb fitted the door. His hammer drove the final hinge pin home. 3 sharp blows. The door swung on its hinges without scraping. Perfect. He stepped back, studied his work, nodded once. Elena dipped her brush. The bristles hog hair bound with wire loaded with whitewash. She painted the last section of wall, long strokes, even coverage. The lime smell filled her nose, sharp, alkaline, the smell of permanence. The cabin had 2 rooms now, kitchen in front, bedroom in back, real windows with glass, real floor, real roof that didn't leak when the rains came. The walls stood plumb. The corners met square. Every joint tight and true. Caleb had built this, board by board, nail by nail. His grip had shaped every piece of lumber. His eye had measured every angle. But Elena had been there, holding boards while he sawed, mixing lime for whitewash, sweeping sawdust, handing him nails, working beside him in the heat and the dust, and the endless labor of making something from nothing. They'd built this together. Elena finished the last wall, set down her brush. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers cramped, White streaks covered her dress, her hair, her forearms where she'd pushed it back from her face. She looked at the room, at the transformation from rough lumber to finished space, at the place that would be lived in, cooked in, slept in, at home. The word still felt strange, uncertain, but less so than 6 weeks ago. Caleb appeared in the doorway. Stove came in. He gestured toward the yard where a wagon sat. Need help unloading? They worked in silence. The cast-iron stove weighed more than both of them combined. They rolled it on poles, inch by inch across the yard, up a ramp of planks into the kitchen. Positioned it against the north wall where the chimney pipe could vent through the roof. Caleb connected the pipe. Black stovepipe sections fitting together, sealed with furnace cement. The final section pushed through the roof hole he'd cut yesterday. He climbed onto the roof, secured the cap, climbed back down. Elena touched the stove. Cold iron, smooth casting, 4 burners, an oven with a temperature gauge. Real, solid, worth more than everything else in the cabin combined. Sold 2 Colts yesterday, Caleb said, answering her unspoken question. The black fetched $45. 2 Colts, the black gelding and one of the chestnuts, both gentle now, both ready for work. Elena had spent 8 weeks on them, teaching them to accept a saddle, a bridle, a rider's weight, teaching them that humans meant safety instead of danger. 8 weeks of work, now converted to iron and heat and the ability to cook real meals instead of salt pork fried in a skillet. Good, Elena said, her throat tight. Caleb nodded, walked outside, left her standing in the kitchen with her palm on the cold stove and her ribs full of awareness she couldn't name. That evening she returned from the corral. The bay colt had taken a hackamore today. First time, fought it for 10 minutes, then surrendered, accepted the leather across his nose, the reins against his neck. Another step toward being broke. Elena's shoulders burned, her back hurt. Good pain, earned pain. She walked toward the cabin, stopped. The porch had a bench. She'd left this morning before dawn to work the horses in the cool air. The porch had been empty then. Raw boards, no rails, no furniture, just Caleb's plan sketched in pencil on brown paper. Now a bench sat there, wide, deep, sanded smooth, the wood honey-colored and unmarked. 2 thick posts held up a roof extension, creating shade, creating shelter, and along the porch rail tin cans. 5 of them. Wildflowers spilling over the edges. Purple aster, yellow rabbit brush, white evening primrose, transplanted from the creek, roots still dirt-covered. Fresh. Elena walked closer, touched the bench, ran her palm along the armrest. No splinters. The wood worn smooth by hours of sanding, by hands that understood she'd sit here, would rest here at the end of long days. She looked at the flowers, at the care taken to dig them without damaging roots, to fill the cans with good soil, to water them so they wouldn't wilt in the afternoon heat. Caleb had done this. Sometime today, while she worked with the horses, built this bench, this shelter, gathered these flowers, created this space for her. She sat. The bench held her weight without creaking. She looked west, watched the sun drop toward the hills. The light turned gold, then orange, then pink. The sage glowed silver. The land stretched forever. Empty. Beautiful, unforgiving, and magnificent in equal measure. She understood now why Caleb had marked the plan's evening view. This was worth protecting, worth building toward, worth staying for. Footsteps behind her, Caleb emerged from the cabin, held 2 tin cups, steam rising, coffee smell. He handed her one, sat beside her on the bench. Not close, but not distant either, maybe a foot between them. They drank in silence, watched the sun set. The sky cycled through colors, orange to pink to purple to deep blue. Stars appeared. First one, then dozens, then too many to count. The coffee cooled. Elena's fingers warmed around the cup. Her body settled into the bench, into the space Caleb had built, into the quietness of 2 people who'd learned to be comfortable in shared silence. "Thank you," she said finally, meaning the bench, the flowers, the care. Caleb nodded, didn't speak, didn't need to. They sat until full dark, until the stars blazed overhead and the coyotes started calling from the hills. Then Caleb stood, collected the empty cups, disappeared into the cabin. Elena stayed. Let the night settle around her. Let the enormity of what had been built, not just the cabin and the porch, but awareness between them, become real. The next evening she cooked on the real stove. First meal in the real kitchen. The cast iron held heat like nothing she'd worked with before. Even consistent. The oven baked bread with a perfect crust. Golden. Crisp. The interior soft and steaming when she tore it open. She fried salt pork, boiled beans with the last of the wild onions she'd found near the creek, made gravy with flour and drippings and coffee. Simple food, but hot, fresh, filling. She set the table Caleb had built, pine boards sanded smooth, 4 legs mortised and pegged, solid enough to last generations. She laid out tin plates, new ones, blue enamel rims, not bent, not dented, purchased with money from the colts they'd sold, forks, knives, spoons, a butter dish, though they had no butter, a salt cellar, cloth napkins she'd hemmed from flour sack fabric, a real table, set for a real meal. Caleb came in from evening chores, washed at the basin, dried his grip on the towel hanging by the door, sat at the table, looked at the plate she'd set before him, at the food steaming and ready, and more than just fuel for working bodies. "This is," he started. Stopped, picked up his fork. "Good." They ate. The food tasted better in the real kitchen at the real table. Or maybe Elena had just forgotten what it felt like to eat a meal that wasn't cooked over an open fire, to sit at a table instead of on the ground, to use real plates instead of tin that burned your fingers, to share space with someone who'd earned the right to be there. After eating, Caleb pushed back his chair, stood, walked to the bedroom, returned with a leather case in his hand. Cracked. Old. He opened it, pulled out a harmonica. "Can't play worth a damn," he said. "Yet." He lifted it to his lips. Blew. The sound came out uncertain, wavering. He tried a scale, got halfway before the notes tangled. He lowered the harmonica, frowned at it. Elena's mouth twitched. "Can I?" She stopped. Didn't know how to finish. Could she laugh? Was that allowed? This moment felt too new, too fragile. But Caleb smiled. A real smile. Not just the corner of his mouth lifting, but his whole face transforming. "Go ahead," Elena laughed. Not loud, not long, but genuine. The sound filled the kitchen, bounced off the whitewashed walls, settled into the corners like it belonged there. Caleb lifted the harmonica again, tried another tune. This one steadier, recognizable. "Oh, Susanna." Simple, basic. But he made it through. Elena hummed along, then sang, softly at first, then stronger. Her grandmother's songs, Spanish lyrics about doves and rivers and waiting, about patience, about faith that rain would come even in drought. Caleb played. Elena sang. The music filled the cabin. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, just two people making sound together, creating awareness that hadn't existed before this moment. The songs ended. The silence returned. But different now. Fuller, somehow. Caleb set down the harmonica, looked at Elena across the table. The lamplight caught his face, showed the scar through his eyebrow, showed the lines around his eyes from squinting in sun, showed the man who'd built this place board by board and nail by nail, showed the man who'd offered her work instead of pity, partnership instead of charity, a place instead of a position. "Elena," he said, her name in his mouth. Careful, waited. She waited. His hand moved across the table, palm up, open, an offering, an invitation. She looked at his palm, at the calluses, at the scars, at the crooked pinky finger, at the proof of labor and honesty and keeping promises. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed. Warm, rough, steady. He didn't pull her closer, didn't lean across the table, just held her grip, let the connection exist. Simple, true. "Stay," he said. Not a question, not a command. Just a statement, a hope made audible. Elena's throat tightened, her eyes burned. She nodded. Couldn't trust her voice. But her hand squeezed his. Answered without words. They sat like that, fingers clasped across the pine table, the lamp burning between them, the walls holding them in, the roof keeping weather out, the home they'd built sheltering this moment, this choice, this beginning. Finally, Caleb released her grip, stood, should check the horses. Elena nodded, stood, started clearing the table. Her palms moved through familiar motions, scraping plates, stacking dishes. But her mind stayed on the feel of his hand, on the word he'd said, "Stay," on her answer, "Yes." She washed dishes in the basin, dried them, put them away on the shelf Caleb had built. Perfect height, perfect depth, made for her hands to reach without stretching. She hung the dish towel, turned down the lamp, walked to the lean-to, her temporary space. Her sleeping place until what? The question lingered. Unanswered, but present. The cabin had a bedroom. Empty. Waiting. But neither of them had spoken about it. About the next step. About what staying meant beyond partnership and work and shared meals. Elena lay on the straw tick, stared at the ceiling, thought about Caleb's hand in hers, about the bench he'd built, about the wildflowers, about the unspoken promises woven through every board and nail and careful measurement, about the brown paper plans hidden under this very mattress, plans for a house even bigger than what stood now, plans that included morning light in the kitchen and evening views from the porch and space for what, for whom. Elena's palm moved to her ribs, pressed against where her heart hammered, not from fear, from awareness that felt like possibility and terror mixed together. She'd said yes to staying, but what exactly had she agreed to? The question followed her into sleep, into dreams of houses being built and hands clasping across tables and benches facing west toward sunsets she couldn't quite see. Day 60. The rider appeared mid-morning. Elena saw him from the garden. Black coat, black hat. White collar visible even at distance. She straightened. Set down the basket of squash she'd been gathering. Brushed dirt from her palms. Caleb emerged from the stable. Saw the rider. Stopped. Waited. Reverend Pierce dismounted at the yard's edge, tied his horse to the corral post, walked toward the cabin. His boots kicked up dust. His face showed the kind of concern that preceded judgment. Elena met him at the porch steps. Caleb joined her. They stood side by side, not touching, but together, presenting a united front. "Miss Vasquez." The Reverend nodded. Then to Caleb. "Mr. Morgan." "Reverend," Caleb's voice flat, neutral. Pierce looked between them, at the finished cabin, at the garden, at the horses in the corral, at Elena's calico dress, sun-faded and dirt-stained, at her bonnet hanging on the porch peg, at the work gloves folded on the porch rail, at the evidence of life being lived. "There's talk in town." He said it carefully, like handling something that might break. "About propriety, about the arrangement here." Elena's jaw tightened. What arrangement would that be? A woman, alone, living on a man's property without... Pierce paused, searched for words, without proper structure. "I'm his business partner." Elena's voice came clear, strong. "The horses are mine to break. The profit is mine to share. That's the arrangement. People are concerned for your reputation. Then they should mind their own business." Elena crossed her arms. "This is our land, our work. If that troubles anyone's conscience, they needn't visit." Pierce's eyebrows rose. He looked at Caleb, waiting for him to correct her, to soften her words, to apologize. Caleb said nothing. Just stood there, letting Elena speak, backing her without interfering. The Reverend shifted his weight. "Miss Vasquez, I'm only thinking of your welfare. What people say. What they assume." "I don't care what they assume." Elena's voice hardened. "I care about feeding horses and baking bread and doing work that matters. If that offends someone's sense of propriety, that's their burden to carry, not mine." Pierce opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "The church knows where to find me if the Lord has something to say." Elena uncrossed her arms. "But if it's just townfolk worried about gossip, you can tell them I'm too busy working to care." The Reverend's face reddened. He looked at Caleb again. "You're allowing her to speak this way." "Ain't my place to allow or disallow." Caleb's tone remained even. "She's got a tongue and a mind, uses both." Pierce stared, then gathered his reins. "I came out of Christian concern. Then thank you for your concern. Elena's voice softened slightly. But as you can see, I'm fine. Better than fine. So unless there's something else. The Reverend mounted his horse, looked down at them from his saddle. His face showed confusion more than anger, like he couldn't quite understand what he was witnessing. A woman speaking for herself. A man letting her. Both of them unashamed. Good day to you both. He turned his horse. Rode back the way he'd come. Elena watched him disappear over the rise. Her palms had started shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of holding steady, of speaking truth without apology. Caleb's hand touched her elbow. Brief, warm, then gone. Handled that well. Elena nodded. Couldn't trust her voice yet. Walked back to the garden, picked up her basket, resumed harvesting squash, but her fingers still trembled. Her ribs felt tight. She'd just told a reverend to mind his business, had defended her life here, had claimed ownership of her choices, and Caleb had let her. Hadn't spoken for her, hadn't softened her words, just stood beside her, silent support. That meant more than any words could have. 2 months. Summer fading to fall. The cottonwoods by the creek turning gold. Elena worked the last 2 horses. Both chestnuts. Both ready to sell. She'd spent 10 weeks total on the 6 colts, teaching them to accept saddle and bridle and rider, teaching them that humans could be trusted. The bay colt, the first one, grazed in the near pasture. Fully broke, gentle as a house cat. He lifted his head when Elena passed, nickered. She stopped, scratched his forehead, moved on. The garden yielded. Squash, green beans, turnips, onions, enough to fill the root cellar. Enough to last through winter. Elena spent afternoons preserving, pickling beans in brine, storing squash wrapped in straw, building security 1 jar at a time. The cabin felt permanent now. Lived in. The stove heated the space against evening cold. The table held meals 3 times daily. The bedroom remained empty, unused. But the door stayed open. Waiting. Neither of them spoke about it, about the next step, about what partnership might become beyond work and meals and comfortable silence. But the question lived in the air between them. Unspoken, but present. The rider came on a Tuesday. Elena recognized the borrowed horse before she recognized Robert. Same poor hooves, same ill-fitting saddle. But Robert looked different. Thinner, tired. Defeated somehow. He dismounted at the yard's edge. Stood there. Uncertain. Elena walked from the garden, wiped her palms on her apron. Waited. Elena. His voice quieter than last time, less demanding. Could I have a moment? She looked toward the stable. Caleb worked inside, visible through the door, aware but not interfering, letting her handle this. All right. Elena gestured to the porch. Coffee. Robert nodded, followed her, sat on the bench, looked at the wildflowers in their tin cans, at the view facing west, at the evidence of care and permanence. Elena poured coffee from the pot she kept warm on the stove, brought out 2 cups. Proper tin cups with blue enamel, not bent, not dented. She handed one to Robert. Sat beside him. Not close. A safe distance. They drank in silence. Robert's hands still clean, still manicured, shook slightly around the cup. Elena watched him. Saw the boy she'd agreed to marry. Saw how small he looked now, how diminished. "I'm heading back east," Robert said finally. "Thought I'd stop. Say goodbye proper." Elena nodded. Sipped her coffee. "I was wrong." Robert stared into his cup. "About you, about this, about everything." "Yes." He looked at her then. Really looked. Took in her sun-darkened skin, her calloused palms, her work-stained dress, her unbonneted head and wind-blown hair. "You look different." "I am different. Happy." He said it like a question, like he couldn't quite believe it. "Yes." Robert set down his cup. Stood. "It's not too late. If you wanted to, it's not too late." Elena cut him off. Stood. Faced him. "You're right about that. It's not too late for me to build the life I want. Not too late to do work that matters. Not too late to belong somewhere." She paused. "But that somewhere isn't with you." Robert's face crumpled. Recovered. He nodded. "I understand. Do you? I think so." He walked to his horse, mounted, looked back at Elena standing on the porch, at the cabin behind her, at the life visible in every detail. "For what it's worth, I'm glad that you found this." Elena nodded. Said nothing. Watched him ride away. This time she felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pain. Just the quiet certainty that he belonged to a past that had no power over her present. She poured out the remaining coffee. Washed both cups, dried them, put them away. Walked back to the garden. Caleb appeared beside her, handed her the hoe she'd left by the pumpkins. "All right. Yes." She took the hoe. Started working soil around the turnips. More than all right. They worked the rest of the afternoon. Side by side. Preparing the garden for winter. Pulling spent plants. Covering tender ones. Building small walls of straw to protect against frost. The sun dropped toward the hills. The light turned golden. Elena straightened, pressed her palm to the small of her back, looked at what they'd accomplished. Rows neat, garden ready, work done. "Come on." Caleb collected the tools. "Getting cold." They walked to the cabin, washed at the basin. Elena started dinner. Beans and salt pork and cornbread. Simple food. Hot and filling. They ate at the table. The lamp burned between them. The stove ticked as it cooled. After eating, Elena washed dishes. Caleb dried. They moved around each other in the small kitchen. Practiced. Efficient. A rhythm learned over 2 months of shared space. The dishes done. Caleb walked to the porch. Elena followed. They sat on the bench. Watched the stars emerge. The air smelled of sage and coming winter. The horses settled in the corral. The bay colt lay down in the grass. Content. Elena looked at her palms. At the calluses. At the dirt permanent in the creases. At the proof of work done and work to come. At the transformation written into her flesh. She'd arrived here with 73 cents and a carpet bag and a lifetime of believing she wasn't worth keeping. Had left everything behind except the pattern of running. But she'd stopped running, had stayed, had worked, had built awareness that couldn't be taken away because it lived in her hands and her skill and her choice to remain. Caleb's hand rested on the bench between them, not reaching, just there, present, steady. Elena didn't take his grip, didn't need to, just let hers rest beside it. Close, connected without touching. "Good day," Caleb asked, his voice quiet, almost lost in the evening sounds. Elena thought about the Reverend's visit, about Robert's goodbye, about the garden ready for winter and the horses broke and sold and the root cellar full, about the bench she sat on and the cabin behind her and the life she'd built from nothing but work and refusal to quit. "Good day," she said. They sat in silence. The sun finished setting. The sky cycled through colors, gold to pink to purple to dark. The stars multiplied. The coyotes started their evening song. The air grew cold. Elena's breath showed white. But she didn't move, didn't go inside. Just sat there with Caleb. Two people on a bench, watching darkness claim the land they'd chosen to call theirs. No promises spoken, no declarations made, just the quiet understanding that tomorrow would come and they'd wake and work and sit here again. And the day after, and the day after that. As many days as they chose, as long as they stayed. Elena looked at the yard, at the stable and the corral and the garden and the cabin, at everything that existed because hands had built it and voices had claimed it and hearts had decided it was worth protecting. At home. Not given, not bestowed, not rescued into, earned. The word settled into her bones. True, final, unshakable. Caleb stood, offered his hand. Elena took it, let him pull her up. They walked inside together. He banked the fire. She turned down the lamp. They moved to their separate spaces, the lean-to for her, the cabin for him. But the door between them stayed open. The future stayed possible. The choice to stay stayed hers. And for the first time in her life, Elena went to sleep not wondering where she'd go next, but knowing she was already where she belonged. There's a weight that settles in after a story like Elena's. Not heavy exactly, but present. The kind that comes from watching someone carry something you recognize the question of whether you're worth keeping. Whether staying is braver than leaving. Whether the work of your hands means anything at all. Maybe that weight feels familiar. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, it's allowed to sit there, unresolved. Many of us have stood where Elena stood. Not at that particular horse trough, but somewhere similar, counting coins that weren't enough, wondering if anyone saw us as more than what we'd lost or what we'd failed to become. And some of us have known what it means to choose staying when every instinct says run, to build something small and real because no one was coming to build it for us, to let our hands get rough from honest work. This story doesn't have to teach us anything. It's allowed to be what it was, one woman learning she didn't need rescuing. Just space to prove what she already knew about herself. That's enough. It doesn't need to resolve into wisdom or wrap up neat. Some things just rest quiet, the way evening settles over hills. Thank you for staying with this. Thank you for listening to something that took its time, getting where it needed to go.